Hi, it's Chef Crystal from Crystal Dawn Culinary, and today I'm going to show you how to make a recipe from my brand new cookbook, The Art of Raw Desserts. We're going to make some Mexican chocolate mousse bars. Now this recipe is reminiscent of a Mexican chocolate cake with all the spices such as cinnamon, clove, cayenne pepper, and this is a really simple recipe. We're going to start off making a blonde buckwheat crust, and then we're going to top it off with the creamiest, richest avocado cream filling. And then we're going to slice the bars, we're going to enrobe them, and then they're going to be all ready to devour. So let's get started with the blonde buckwheat crust. Now this recipe is really simple. We just have a few ingredients here. You always want to start off with your dry ingredients and then add your wet ingredients into the food processor. So you are going to need a food processor for this. And you do want an 8x8 square pan because this is what we're going to use to form the bars. So I'm going to start off with some dry raw almonds and some dry raw buckwheat groats, some coconut sugar. And then I have some mesquite powder, which is a superfood powder, but it also adds a lovely, wonderful taste and extra sweetness to this crust. And then I have some oat flour. So then we're going to process up the dry ingredients until they reach a coarse flour or a fine crumble. You just want to check to make sure you don't have any large chunks of almonds in there, and this actually looks really good. So now we can get started on adding the wet ingredients. So we're going to start off by adding in some tahini, and you can use any nut butter for this. I really like the taste of tahini in this recipe, and I'm using roasted tahini because it has a lot more flavor. And then we're going to add in some melted coconut oil to bind the ingredients together when it sets in the fridge. And then I have some vanilla. Now you can use any vanilla extract that you have on hand. I'm using a medicine flower extract. So now we want to process this up until all of the ingredients start forming together. So I'm just going to double check this. And it's sticking together, but I'm just going to process it up for a couple more seconds. Okay, so this looks good. So now I'm going to take my 8x8 square pan, and you'll notice that I have one where the edges come straight up. So I find that these always work best when you're doing bars. You can get pans that come out on the side, but if you can find one of these, they form a lot better. So then I'm going to grab some parchment paper, and you just want to line the pan. So I have two pieces, and I'm just going to crisscross them. And then I'm going to grab my crust batter and I'm going to pour it into the pan. I'm going to start pressing this down into the bottom of the pan. You want to use your fingers first for this, and then we're going to use the back of a spoon. This part is always a little bit more tedious, also too because I like to get a nice even crust. You don't have to be as picky as myself, but I just like to have that nice even layer. And then I'm going to grab a large spoon. And what I like to do is just take the back of the spoon and we're just going to press it firmly on top of the crust just to even the layer out even more. All right, so that looks good to me. I have my crust layer all nice and even. And that is it for the crust component. Super simple. So I'm going to set this aside at room temperature, and then we're going to come back and we're going to make the chocolate mousse filling. So now we're going to make our chocolate avocado mousse, and this has all those wonderful spices that you would have in a Mexican chocolate cake like cinnamon, clove, and cayenne pepper. So this is going to be the creamiest chocolate mousse that you're ever going to taste. You can serve this component just as a pudding, as a side, but in this case we're going to put it in these wonderful bars. So again, we have just a few simple ingredients, and the base of this recipe is going to be avocado. Now a lot of people always ask me, I don't know if I can put avocado in the filling. Does that just overtake all the flavors? And no, it does not. You won't even taste the avocado at all, trust me. It's just going to taste like a wonderful creamy chocolate mousse. So we're going to use a food processor for this recipe. So let's add in the avocado. We're gonna add in all of the ingredients except for the coconut oil. We're gonna add in the coconut oil after this is all processed up. So then we're gonna add in our liquid sweetener. Then we're gonna add in some cacao powder. Then we have some cinnamon. Cinnamon is always widely used in Mexican chocolate cake. And then we have clove, cayenne pepper, and a little bit of salt for flavor balancing. And then we have our homemade creamy coconut milk. So now we're going to turn the food processor on, and we're going to let this process up until it reaches a really nice mousse consistency. And I will have to scrape it down partway through, so we'll do that as well. So let's scrape this down. We want to scrape down the sides and make sure we're getting in all of the ingredients. And I did forget to add in our vanilla, so we do want to do that. You can add this in at the beginning or at the end, it really doesn't matter. So now I want to go ahead and add in the coconut oil, and I'm going to do that as it's processing. So on this food processor, I have the option to remove this so that I'm able to pour ingredients in as it's processing. And when you make this at home, you're going to notice that amazing aroma. All I smell is this wonderful chocolate. So we have our delicious, creamy, thick chocolate mousse here. We're going to add it into our pan on top of the blonde buckwheat crust that we made. So I'm going to pour it into the crust. And this is why you want to leave the crust at room temperature, because this filling has coconut oil in it. And if you put the crust in the fridge or the freezer and it's cool, when you start adding in the filling, it's going to set and it's going to be harder to spread onto the base. So make sure you always leave it at room temperature while you're making the filling. So now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the pan like this, just to distribute the filling as much as I can before I start using an offset spatula. So then I like to take a small offset spatula, and I'm just going to start using it to spread out to the outer edges. Okay, so this looks good to me. We have our creamy chocolate mousse filling on top of our blonde buckwheat crust. And so this is all ready to set in the freezer. I'm going to pop this in the freezer, and then we're going to come back and we're going to slice the bars into chocolate bars, and then we are going to enrobe them, and then they're going to be ready to eat. So this is all done setting in the freezer, so we're ready to cut them into bars. What you're going to need is a cutting board, a sharp knife, as well as a ruler, because we're going to cut these into 2-inch by 1-inch bars. You're going to want to take this out about 15 minutes before you start cutting them, just so that it's softened enough for you to cut, but also you want them still to be frozen. The key and the trick to getting perfect slices is to cut them when they're still semi-frozen so that it's easy to get those nice clean slices. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to peel the parchment away from the edges, and you can see that the edges are already starting to get soft. And you want to trim the edges off first. So we're just going to start by trimming off these edges. And I always eat the ends, so just keep them aside and eat them. You can snack on them. And you'll see that the chocolate mousse is really starting to soften, and that's fine. It's just getting really soft on the edges. But you want this filling to be really soft and creamy, but don't forget it's going to be protected inside the chocolate when we enrobe them. So we have our ends trimmed off. So now we're going to cut these into our 2-inch by 1-inch bars. So like I said, I like to have a ruler on hand for this. And I'm just gonna score and make marks at the 2-inch mark. So I only need to do 3. So we're gonna start off by making those cuts. And here you really do want to wipe off your blade before you move on to the next cut. Do our last one here. Okay, so now we have those cuts done. We're going to start on the 1-inch cuts. So I'm going to go ahead again and I'm going to score these at the 1-inch mark. So as you cut each bar, you can just move them to the side. So we have our bars all cut, and before we enrobe them, we want to cool these in the freezer. So put these on a lined tray. I'm gonna stick these back in the freezer, let them firm up for a couple of hours, and then we're gonna come back. I'm gonna show you how to make our beautiful homemade dark enrobing chocolate, and then we're gonna cover them, decorate them, and then they're all gonna be ready to eat. So we're gonna make our beautiful enrobing dark chocolate. Now this is a really great simple homemade dark chocolate recipe that you can use for basically anything. You can use it for chocolate garnishes, use it to cover anything in chocolate that you're making at home, or just use it as a chocolate recipe. If you want to make chocolate bars or use some fun molds in the kitchen with your kids, you can make that as well. This chocolate is made with a base of cacao butter and cacao paste. So the difference between cacao butter and paste, so this is what the butter looks like. It's just the fat derived from the cacao bean, and then this is cacao paste. So I like to use cacao paste. It's also called cacao mass or cocoa liqueur. It has different names for it. And I like to use this because it provides a much smoother result than cacao powder, and it's a lot easier to work with. And then we're gonna add in some liquid sweetener. So here I have coconut nectar. You can also use agave or maple syrup, whatever you prefer. And then we're gonna add in some vanilla because no chocolate is complete without some vanilla flavor. So I'm gonna show you my method to melting down chocolate. Now everyone has their own way of melting chocolate down. Some people like to use double boiler method on the stove. I do not, because it's really easy to burn your chocolate that way, and then it's going to be ruined. You have to discard it. So this way that I'm going to show you is going to be a fail-safe way to melt it down, and you're not going to have it burn. So I like to use 2 stainless steel bowls. So this is technically a double boiler method as well, but we're going to be adding in hot water into the bottom bowl instead of having it on the stove. So then you're going to want another stainless steel bowl to go right on top. And we're going to be putting the cacao butter and cacao paste into here. You want to warm up some water first though, so I always like to warm it up in the kettle. And we're going to add this into the bottom. So while that's warming up, I'm just going to add in my ingredients into this bowl. And I prefer to use stainless steel over glass because it conducts the heat better and melts down quicker. Okay, so our water's done boiling. I'm going to add this into the smaller bowl. You don't want to fill it up too much because you don't want the water to spill over the edges. One really important note is you don't want to get water in your chocolate because otherwise it will seize and it'll be really difficult to work with. So I'm going to let this melt down. And if you want to learn more about chocolate and dive into the science behind it and learn more of the technical aspect, you can check out my brand new cookbook, The Art of Raw Desserts. It's on sale now. So as this is melting down, you're going to want to grab a spatula and start stirring it around. You're going to want to allow it to be fully melted before you add in your liquid sweetener and flavorings. So I'm just going to be patient and just let it melt, and then I'm going to stir it around. So our chocolate is all melted down. We're ready to add the rest of the ingredients. Now it's important to add in our liquid sweetener while the chocolate is still on the heat because it's going to incorporate that much easier. You'll see that as I start adding it in, it's going to start looking really thick and a little bit grainy. But as I stir it around and incorporate it, it's going to go nice and smooth again. And then we're going to add in our vanilla flavoring. And like I said, you can use any vanilla that you have on hand. If you have some regular vanilla extract at home, you can just use 1 teaspoon. I'm using the medicine flower vanilla extract, and I'm going to add in some drops. So there we go, there is our lovely homemade dark chocolate. So from here you can use this in molds, you can use it to decorate things, use it as a garnish. So we're going to use this to enrobe our lovely desserts. So I'm going to set this aside, and I have my chocolate all done to use for my desserts. So now for the fun part, we get to enrobe our chocolate bars and then we get to eat them. So we have our chocolate that's all been melted down. We want to add this into a smaller bowl because this is the bowl that we're going to use to dip the chocolate bars in. I'm also using a dipping fork. So this is a chocolate dipping fork. You can just use a regular dinner fork if you don't have one of these. And then you want a tray lined with parchment paper because this is where we're going to put the enrobed chocolate bars when we're done. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the chocolate into my dipping bowl. You want to fill the bowl up pretty full because you want enough volume in there to cover the bars. So now I'm going to grab our chocolate bars. So these have been in the freezer firming up. So these are all ready to enrobe, and we know they're not going to melt while we add them in the chocolate. So the first thing you want to do is you want to drop in one of the bars, and you're just going to make sure it's all covered. And you want to remember where the base is. So this is why I always drop them in with the base down so that I know where the base is, so that then I can take it out like this. And then you just want to scrape some of the excess chocolate. And then we're just going to put it onto our lined tray. It's that simple. And you don't need to keep these in for very long. So our bars are all enrobed and they look beautiful like this, but we're going to make them look extra special and add some chocolate drizzle on top. Now to do that, I like to use a piping bag. You can also use a squeeze bottle for this. And we're going to add in some of the melted dark chocolate into the bag. And you don't need a lot. Now I just like to do a little test to see if I need to make the hole bigger. And yes, I just need to make it a little bit bigger. So that should be good. Now I'm just going to start drizzling some chocolate on the top of the bars like this. So there's our chocolate bars all covered in our beautiful chocolate drizzle. They look absolutely stunning. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to dig in. I really want to try one. I'm going to cut into one so that I can show you what they look like on the inside. I'm going to choose one here. Now, if you want a nice, even slice, you might want to warm up your knife before you do this, but I'm just going to slowly cut it like that and do this. Oh my gosh, they look so delicious. Look at that crunchy buckwheat crust. We have that creamy avocado chocolate mousse filling covered in chocolate. We have so many textures and lovely flavors going on. Everyone that you serve these to are going to absolutely love them. I hope you love this recipe as much as I do. If you want to learn more recipes like this, you can check out my brand new cookbook, The Art of Raw Desserts, available for order now. And if you run into any issues at all when you're making this, please reach out. I'm always happy to help. And thank you so much for joining this class today. I hope you enjoy the dessert.